Universal basic income. The ultimate would be nice to have, but we could never afford it achievement for any developed country. It is often touted as being far too expensive, even for the United States. Well, what if I told you that not only could it be affordable, but we could actually do it for the same amount of money that the US government is already bringing in? What's up, guys? Acer Thorn here, and this is Purple Politics. So what exactly is Universal Basic Income, or UBI for short? Well, basically it means that every person is given a certain amount of money each month from the government to live off of, without having to work to earn that income. The income is unconditional. The idea is that this would free the working class from the bondage of wage slavery and force employers to pay their employees well and treat them with respect in order to keep the employees, since employers wouldn't be able to hover the threat of starvation and financial destitution over their heads in order to get away with being total dicks and paying the employees minimum wage. Naturally, this proposal generates an almost knee-jerk reaction from the upper class. Their arguments against it can effectively be grouped into two distinct categories. First, that people would stop working if they had all their needs met by handouts alone, and second, that the cost of giving everybody in the country enough money to live off of every single month would be so massive that even the United States federal government could never afford it. The first excuse has been debunked 11 ways to Sunday, but the second excuse is one that even the most hardcore liberals have a hard time arguing against. After all, when people run estimates of how much it will cost each year to have UBI, the estimates range from $3.1 trillion a year to $4 trillion a year. Even if you reduce federal military spending down to nothing, and no one, not even liberals, are arguing we should do that, we still wouldn't be able to afford UBI at $4 trillion a year without causing the already massive deficit to enter a whole new extra digit just on UBI alone. Well, I have an idea on how we can not only make UBI affordable, but how we can do it with the money we're already spending supporting the poor. See, the problem with universal basic income is that it's, well, universal. This means that everyone gets the same monthly stipend each month, from the lowest of hobos all the way up to Elon Musk himself. This means that even those who absolutely don't need this government handout would still get it simply because it's universal. But that just begs the question, why? Why don't we withhold UBI for those who clearly don't need it? Now, to be fair, many would answer that question by pointing to the history of government bureaucracies making egregious miscalculations when determining how much welfare a household quote-unquote needs. Federal bureaucrats in southern states back in the early 20th century, for example, would frequently adjudge black families as needing less money than white families, all else being equal. On the other extreme, many social welfare programs will cut your benefits off completely if you make even $1 in earned income that month. This obviously incentivizes people to actively avoid employment, since unless they can manage to land a hell of a sweet gig, which is excessively unlikely given their complete lack of work history, it's simply not in their best interests to get paid work. The problem, however, is that these are two opposite extremes. Either bureaucrats have way too much discretion in calculating people's benefits, or they have way too little. Because the vast majority of social welfare programs follow one of these two models, very few people have been introduced to any middle ground system and thus don't think about them. I, however, do know about a welfare system that offers a middle ground. Supplemental Security Income, or SSI for short. SSI is a social security program designed for disabled people rather than elderly people. It is designed to provide a safety net for those people whose disabilities make it far more difficult for them to get gainful employment. If you qualify for SSI, you can still have employment and still keep a portion of your SSI benefits. Your benefits are reduced if you have any earned income, and they are reduced at a rate of 50 cents on the dollar. What that means is that your SSI benefits are reduced by half of your earned income. I'm currently showing a web page on screen right now, and I'll provide a link to it in the bibliography, the link of which is in the description. This page is an SSI calculator that lets you figure out what your SSI benefits will be based on how much earned income you bring in from your job. In order for your SSI benefits to disappear completely, you have to make, effectively, twice your maximum SSI benefits in wages from employment. This means that it is always beneficial for an SSI recipient to obtain gainful employment if he can find it, since he will always come out of it with more money overall than if he had stayed unemployed by choice. This provides an even greater incentive to seek work if you can find it than if the benefits were reduced at a 1-to-1 rate. After all, if your SSI benefits are reduced dollar for dollar, that means you're basically doing 20 hours a week of essentially free labor before you start to turn a profit from it, which can easily discourage many people from getting part-time jobs they might otherwise be able and willing to do. If we adopted this rule for universal basic income, it would make the annual cost of this program much cheaper. If we had a baseline of $1,000 per month for every UBI recipient, which is the assumption used to reach the $4 trillion estimate from earlier, you would lose all your UBI benefits if your earned income is over $2,000 a month or $24,000 a year. If you make just $11.54 an hour, you can probably make enough money to not receive UBI at all under this system. This would also eliminate the problem of bureaucrats being able to use arbitrary factors to decrease benefits for those who they don't personally like. If a person's UBI benefits are based entirely on their level of earned income, there's no real outlet for a bureaucrat to invoke his discretion. You either made this money from your job or you didn't. It either is the amount they're trying to deduct you on, or it isn't. So, if we implemented this system, how much would universal basic income cost each year? Well, calculating the exact amount would require resources that are far outside my pay grade as a small-time YouTuber. But a good way to guesstimate the annual cost would be to look at the poverty rates in the United States. Bear in mind that poverty rates and poverty levels are two different things. The poverty level is the maximum amount of income you can have and still be considered living in poverty. Poverty levels are measured in dollar amounts. Poverty rates, on the other hand, are measured in percentages, and they are the percent of the population that are living in poverty. I estimate that considering the national average poverty level is a good way of gauging the approximate cost of universal basic income that is based on earned income, give or take a few tens of billions of dollars a year. Well, according to the US Census, poverty rates differ based on age group, but the national average is approximately 12.8% across all age ranges. This means that if that percent of people are given full universal basic income, the annual estimate goes from $4 trillion per year down to a comparatively meager $512 billion per year. To put that in perspective for you, we're already spending several $100 billion a year, more than that, in welfare programs already, without even counting Medicaid, which is honestly a different discussion entirely from universal basic income. So by switching to a UBI system, we'd actually be saving a buttload of money rather than spending it. After all, if we adopt universal basic income, we could probably afford to do away with all the other forms of welfare that aren't directly tied to healthcare or retirement, like SSI, SNAP, formerly known as food stamps, WIC, and many others. After all, if you're already being provided for with UBI, what do you need all these other handouts for? Now sure, in practice, it wouldn't be a simple matter of if you're in poverty, you get the full amount, and if you're not in poverty, you don't get UBI at all. In practice, it would in fact be a spectrum, which is precisely what I'm advocating for in the first place. However, while there are indeed going to be people making enough to be above the poverty guidelines and still be eligible for at least some UBI, which would increase the annual cost for this program, on the other hand, there will inevitably be some people who have a little bit of earned income, but not enough to be considered not in poverty. So they would receive less than the full amount of universal basic income, which would decrease the annual costs of the program. So all in all, give or take a few tens of billions of dollars, which is honestly peanuts by this point anyway, I'd say the two cancel each other out. If anyone has their own estimate of what the annual cost would be that it is based on more thorough research than has a much smaller margin of error, I'd love to hear it. So now that I've figured out how we can make universal basic income not only affordable, but doable on our current federal budget, why don't we tackle the other common argument that conservatives often raise in opposition to this concept? That providing people's needs would mean that nobody would ever be willing to work ever again. Put simply, this argument has absolutely no basis in reality. Small-scale versions of universal basic income have been tested on small groups of people, and all of them consistently report no spikes in unemployment or drops in productivity. Although these experiments have reported a huge drop in one thing, poverty rates, these experiments have also reported a huge spike in something else: the quality of life and overall levels of happiness from the people who receive these so-called handouts. Honestly, the concept of the welfare queen is a long disproven myth. Even the original so-called welfare queen, Linda Taylor, actually made numerous attempts at gainful employment. She was just fucked over by the racist policies of the day, the very racism that caused her to be branded a welfare queen in the first place. So frankly, until the conservatives provide some serious rebuttal evidence rather than just conjecture and fear-mongering, I don't buy it. Now, some of you might reasonably be wondering right now, but aren't there genuine deadbeats out there? Guys who refuse to work? Guys who just mooch off their current girlfriend of the month who is too young and stupid to understand what a deadbeat he is? Yes, there will always be people like that. However, in case you haven't noticed, those people are already chronically unemployed. So employers obviously won't have to worry about losing them. They're already too far gone anyway. Frankly, the existence of these deadbeats might be inevitable, but isn't that all the more reason, not less, to provide universal basic income? At least then, the deadbeats wouldn't have to go hunting for young and stupid prey to support them so they don't have to work themselves. They're not going to work regardless, so might as well protect the young and naive girls they would otherwise leech off of like vampires. At this point, the only people you really need to worry about leaving the workforce are the handful of people who fall into an ultra-specific sweet spot on the work ethic spectrum. The people who would positively refuse to work for a living, no matter how much they are paid or how well they are treated by their boss, and would happily mooch off of Uncle Sam for their living, as long as it was both legal and ethical to do so, but who have just enough pride in themselves that they will work a minimum wage dead-end job that they otherwise positively loathe because they see that as the lesser of two evils compared to mooching off of naive teenage girlfriend number 87 for a few short months before moving on to naive teenage girlfriend number 88. Honestly, if there's anyone out there who is like that, there's gotta be less than 1,000 people across the whole nation. Besides, even if they don't have 9-to-5 jobs, that doesn't mean they won't be productive. Think about all the people who would pursue the fine art of their choosing if they didn't have to subject themselves to wage slavery just to survive. The arts are productive, right? They drive our culture forward, right? Even then, universal basic income may provide for everyone's needs, but not their wants. They would still work for pay as long as there was some benefit to doing so. Who wouldn't want to have a little income of the disposable variety? You want food and rent to survive? UBI can help with that. You want a new PlayStation? Go get a job. Last but not least, there are plenty of benefits to the Republicans as well if we implemented universal basic income. Republicans often oppose increasing minimum wage, arguing that it would impede people's ability to haggle for a lesser wage if they were willing to work for it. Frankly, that argument is complete quackery anyway, but for the sake of argument, let's humor them. If we had universal basic income, we could probably get away with having no minimum wage at all. After all, minimum wage exists in the first place to protect those trapped in wage slavery and ensure that they have a basic standard of living. However, there would obviously be no need to protect those trapped in wage slavery if there's no wage slavery. Sure, people likely wouldn't be willing to do back-breaking construction work for 25 cents an hour, and they certainly wouldn't be willing to be treated like dogs for it, but that's just it. The working class would have a choice, a reasonable choice for the first time ever, to simply say no. So yes, if you want to keep earning profits from your business, you might have to pay the laborers what they're worth, a wage they're genuinely satisfied with, not simply them taking what they can get. You might also have to freshen up on your people skills and make them feel like an appreciated member of the team so they'll want to continue working for you. You might have to start actually being nice to people for a change. But honestly, if that's what you're truly the most worried about, if that's the part about universal basic income that has you the most worried that you can no longer be a snooty rich prick without consequence, well then, I dare you, I double dog dare you to get on live Fox News and say that out loud. So that was my take on universal basic income. If you enjoyed this video, regardless of whether you agree with my opinion or not, be sure to subscribe for more Purple Politics videos. Once you've done that, check out my featured video for returning subscribers for ways you can support the channel through monetary donations on my Patreon as well as over at my gaming channel. In the meantime, however, I am Acerthorn, and this has been Purple Politics.